So the first step, of course, is the academy process. And this is how we reach our big idle goals, whether your goal is to land your first job or you're here just to go through the process of deliberate practice to improve your outputs. Either way, the process is the same. And that process looks just like this. You've probably seen it before, but I want to show it to you again. And so, of course, the first step is to learn, right? And so what are you going to learn? Of course, you have to have some kind of goal, right? So I want to learn how to write scripts. That's my example, okay? So you're going to watch the scripting for instructional content with Dr. Nicole. We have some other scripting resources in the academy. So you're going to watch, read, maybe participate, whatever it is that you need to do to learn how to write a script. That'd be your first step in the process. Your next step is to do, right? You don't learn passively. Learning comes with taking action. And so you got to do, you got to create, you got to try and write your first script. And then your next step is feedback. It's got to get your feedback from your peers, implement that feedback, and then get feedback from your academy coaches, right? Because that gives you tailored, specific expert feedback, implement their feedback. And then based on where you are in your journey, if you are building your portfolio because you haven't built one yet, well, then after you implement the academy coach feedback, you upload it to your portfolio. Or if you're already an experienced idol and you're coming here for professional development, then maybe you have submitted a project that you need to submit to your stakeholders, right, for a final review or something like that. This is the process. If you go through this process for every single asset that goes into your portfolio, you will have a knockout portfolio. And this really is and truly is a process that every single person that joins the Idle Mug Club goes through and sticks to. Stick to this process. And the other thing about it is this process is not just like an academy process, right? It's also the type of process that you will use for your own learners and in the workplace, right? And so much of what we do is getting you prepared for what it's like in the real world in a safe, supportive environment. For example, feedback in the real world is not always kind, loving, and supportive like it is in the academy. Sometimes you will have stakeholders, subject matter experts, or just people that are giving feedback on your assets that don't care if they hurt your feelings. They might be harsh. They may be critical because there's something important that you have to know, and that is that people want to feel important, right? And so to make themselves feel important, they might say things that are harsh or blunt or whatever because they want to have the importance of giving feedback and they feel like they need to add some kind of opinion when you ask them for their feedback, right? And so you're going to build your muscles in the academy to accept feedback without taking it personal, which is a very important soft skill to learn in the academy. I mean, I'm sure many people who can tell you who did not go through a process where they had, kind of like an incubator or a supportive place to learn how to accept feedback. When they started getting feedback just on the job, they probably had to go through like a dark night of the soul, if you will, about how to accept that feedback without taking it personal. Because I'm telling you, I also had to go through that where because you spend so much time creating and developing and learning and all these kinds of things. By the time you submit it for feedback, it's like you think you've birthed a baby and people are calling your baby ugly and you take it very personally. And so if you can learn this skill to not take feedback personally right here before you enter the workplace, you will be all the better for it, I promise. And then when they give you feedback that might be harsh or nonsense or irrelevant, you might get irrelevant feedback, or you might even get feedback that says more about the person that criticized you than it does about your work. You'll just be able to be professional and say, thank you so much for your input. I'll take that into consideration. And then, like, All right, see what you can find that may be valuable. If their feedback is really just harsh criticism, then you know that you can just kind of move on, right? Because you're not going to take it personal. And so this is why not only does this improve the outputs that you build and develop, but it also builds a muscle for you so that you do not take this feedback personally in the future, and you start to welcome it, right? Start to welcome feedback because you know that it will make you better. All right. The instructional design process. Now, this is the big overview, right? You guys have seen this before. This is, and of course I had to put it in here because I want to show you all the different processes. So I'm going to, this one's pretty simple, right? You guys have seen this one probably 100 different times, and it's the ADDIE model, right? It's analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Now, I'm going to show you that each step in this process has its own process, right? Analysis has its own process. Design has its own process. Development, implementation, and evaluation. They each have their own process for this overview of how you get things done to design a course, right? Do you guys have any questions about the ADDIE process? I'm sure that you guys have seen it a million times. If you want me to go in more in depth, I will. Just say so. Well, let me know if I need to, or I can move on. Yeah, gold standard. And also, I want to make it clear too that even though some people say like, oh, we use the SAM model or we're agile developers or whatever, even if you design a prototype instead of a storyboard, or you go through multiple iterative feedback cycles, you can still follow this process in that framework, right? You're still going to have to do some kind of analysis. You're still going to have to design a prototype, right? And eventually you're still going to have to develop it, right? And so this overview really does work even in those types of workplaces where you might do something where it's more like, you know, an agile type of model. Mary says, some consider ADDIE as a cycle. What do you think is more relevant, linear or cycle? I think it's a cycle. I really don't even think it's important to call it linear or a cycle. I think that the steps are important, right? No matter what kind of process you use under each of these different headings, right? Analysis, design, development, you know, they all have their own sub steps or process for each step of these. No matter what those things look at like, you still have to go through it. No matter whether you're doing agile or a cycle or whatever, you're still going to have to figure out who are your learners, what's the business challenge, what's the performance goal. You're still going to have to structure your content. You're still going to have to develop the whole thing eventually, right? And you're still going to have to roll it out and evaluate how you did. Yeah. Okay. So now now analysis process, right? And I covered this last week, but I think because it's all about process, it's worth it to put it in here again so that you can see it as part of the whole. So analysis, A in ADDIE, analysis has its own process, right? The first step is that discovery call. What's the problem? What's the root cause of the problem? Does the client have any solutions in mind already? What are the obstacles that are getting in the way of solving this problem? What are the actions and the behaviors that learners need to take to solve this problem, right? Those are the kinds of things that you're going to find out on your discovery call. And then you're going to do your own research. You're going to find out who those learners are. You're going to find out more about the organization, maybe some conventions of the field for whatever kind of training solution that you're building for, right? Of course, if you determine that it is indeed a requirement, like a training does need to happen, right? It's a knowledge, skill, or maybe an attitude gap. And so you'll need to find out those types of things in your research section. Then you got to do your kickoff meeting, right? So what happens in your kickoff meeting? That's where you establish your project goals, your communication pipelines, your workflows, your deadlines, your potential solution ideas, right? That all happens in your kickoff meeting, right? So where's my SME? here's our timeline. How are we going to communicate? How are we going to get things done? What are some high level ideas that I have about the solution, right? Get their input right there. Get their buy-in from your stakeholders and get all the pieces in place so that you can manage the project. And your next step in that analysis process is interviews, right? So you might do interviews with your subject matter experts, interviews with your learners, interviews with the managers of the employees that you're training, interviews with the top performer, right? The person who does the behaviors that they're looking for, right? What makes them so special? So that's part of your interview section. And then Beth says attitude gap. Yeah, so sometimes training can solve for people's attitude, right? So not necessarily like a full culture thing, but if people don't understand why they need to perform certain skills on the job, training can help solve that by bringing to their attention what's in it for them, their benefits, right? And a lot of times, attitude gaps are rolled in with skills and knowledge gaps, right? When we talk at the very beginning, of course, when we include the what's in it for the learner, you can solve attitude gaps that way. Okay, good. You're welcome. And then that next step is assess and observe, right? And so this is where you can go on the job and find out what is it that they are actually doing, what are they not doing, what are the future learners doing currently on that job. You can see what kind of assessments they've already taken. You can even give like a pre-test to your learners if you want to see where they are as far as their knowledge and their understanding of the content that you're about to build as part of the training solution, right? And so that's the final step in your analysis process. You are gathering data to inform your design. And just like, your instructional designer, her course is data to design, right? This is the data part before the design. And that's what the analysis process is all about, collecting data. All right, any questions about the analysis process? The next one I'm going to get into is the design process. So do you have any questions about analysis at this point? Good. Okay. All right. And so now you have all this data. You know who your learners are. You know what the problem is. You know what's getting in the way. You know what it is that will engage them. You'll know what kind of problems that you're going to solve, right? And so your first step in the design process is your findings, right? What does the data tell you about the problem, its cause, and what the learners need to overcome how are they going to overcome any of these obstacles? Your next step is your design document, right? And you're going to write out your full design document. We're going to capture all this different data that you've done in the analysis phase. All right. And so you're going to write down the performance goals, the learning objectives. You're going to create your outline for the course in your design document. You are going to think about and create your assessments, right? To measure success. How are you going to measure success in this training solution? And then you're also going to probably include a style guide in your design document if you're going to do some kind of visual, right? So if you're going to be doing a PowerPoint for instructor-led training, or if you're going to be doing e-learning development, you're going to want some kind of style guide, because the purpose of a design document, right, is to get buy-in from your stakeholders so that they can see the full plan and understand the full purpose of your design decision, and they're going to agree or make modifications to that plan. And so you include all your data and all your decisions right there in your design document. And many times you'll actually literally want them to sign off on it. And then your next step in the design process is a script. And I'm going to say this several times, but your script is your foundation for your development of anything as an instructional designer, right? Your script is your foundation. I mean, I guess your analysis is your foundation, but I mean, as far as like development goes, script, right? Your actual content is king. How you write your script, what you put in your script, what you exclude from your script, the tone of your script, if you write for visuals and all those kinds of things, it all happens in your script. And what's also really important about your script is that changing text is cheap, right? It's easy for somebody to give feedback on a script and to make changes at that level than it is for you to build an entire video or entire e-learning course, and then they want to change things after you've already got it built, right? So scripts are really important in so many of the different processes that you'll go through to build different assets and training solutions. And so you want to write the entire course script based on your outline, your assessments, your learning objectives, the activities of your course. You want to write the whole thing out. And this is true for all course design types, right? You know, your see, say, do type of script, right? What are they going to see on the screen? What's going to be said? And what are the participants going to be doing at different parts of that script as they flow through that course or that training solution? So you can also consider a script maybe your text-based storyboard, right? Where you can outline, you can like identify the different mediums of how you're going to build out your script and all those kinds of things. So a script really is fundamental. It really is an important foundation in all these different processes that we're going to go through. All right. And then your next step after you've written a script. Now I prefer, now you guys will figure out, right? As you start doing the work of instructional design, at the beginning, you want a solid process. You want to follow that process over and over again until you kind of get your own rhythm. Then you get your own rhythm and you might see that, oh, I can leave out a little piece of this process, or maybe I'll add this to my process or whatever. But as far as like if you're going to come to me and I'm going to tell you, and based on, all the things that I've experienced and the training and all the other inputs that have happened, this is the process that I recommend for you. After your script, I recommend a prototype. Now, if it's an e-learning prototype, what that means is instead of building the full e-learning course, you want to build a small sample of your e-learning, right? Based on your style guide, based on your script, you want to think about what's going to be the visual and what's going to be the interactions and what's going to be the assessments. And so usually in a prototype, you'll probably include your title slide, a content slide, an interactive slide, right? What does the practice activity look like in that e-learning course? An assessment slide, right? An assessment, as you guys will remember, right, doesn't necessarily mean multiple choice. Can be lots of different things, but whatever type of assessments that you're building, what does that look like? You want to include a sample of that in your prototype. And this is so that you can get feedback from your stakeholders early so they can see the visual, they can see what it looks like, they can touch and they can feel, and they can give you feedback on that prototype before you go and build the full thing, right? And so you build your prototype, then you pilot it, right? So you're going to get your feedback from your stakeholders and things like that, but you're going to pilot your prototype in front of your learners, right? You also pilot it in front of your stakeholders, right? And then you're going to evaluate those results, right? What does their feedback say? What do the learners say? What do the stakeholders say? What do the subject matter experts say about your prototype? That's your design process, right? You see that you have not developed a full course yet, right? Because this is just the design, right? You want to get some early input before you go and build the whole thing. Okay. And this is definitely if you build prototypes, it's definitely an iterative framework. There are other people who might do a different design process. And I do think that it's worthwhile to know how to storyboard, but I would say that this really is the fastest, best way in my opinion, and what I found working with clients and working in a company to go through your design process. because you'll find that you really need to know how to do storyboards if you're on an instructional design team, right? And you are separate from the developer. Storyboards are mostly for the developer. They're not really good things to get feedback from your stakeholders on, right? Because they don't know what they're looking at. They get caught up in different things. They don't understand when the visuals don't look exactly what the completed course is going to look like and whatever. And so as far as your design process, I'd say go with prototypes. Storyboards are important, but they're more important if you are going to be handing it off to a developer. Okay, how about your development process, right? Now, I recommend this development process. This development process works for me, and I'm sure that it'll work for you, and it's worked for several others. So the first thing that you want to do when you're ready to get into the full development of your course, you've created your little prototype. But prototypes don't have voiceovers, right? They just kind of have the look and feel. They don't have any kind of sounds. They don't have any voiceover. So now you're into development. The pilot went well. You've made a few tweaks to things, based on your pilot. And now you're ready to develop the entire course. The first thing that you want to do is read your entire script out loud, right? Make sure that that script sounds as good as it, you just want to make sure it sounds good, right? Because a lot of e-learning, for instance, and instructor-led training is going to be spoken verbally. And of course, that's different from reading text, right? So it's got to be conversational it's got to be conversational in tone. It's got to be clear, easy to understand. So you want to read through your script before you hand it over to create a voiceover, right? And so, and also, especially if you're going to hand it over to a voiceover artist, right? Because that's money. If you have created a script, you didn't read it yourself. The voiceover artist just reads what you give them without any input, unless they really have a hard time pronouncing certain things. But you want to read it and make sure that it flows, that it sounds good, it has a good rhythm, that you use second person point of view, it's conversational and all those kinds of things. Reading the script is really important in your development process. And then of course, you're going to create your voiceover. Now, either you're going to create your voiceover or somebody else is going to create your voiceover. Either way, that's your first step in your development process, right? Because then your next step is visuals. Why do I have you do your script and your voiceover first? Because so much of the putting the pieces together, right, is about visualizing the script, right? So you want your script nailed down first before you get into the visualizations of the different pieces of your script and your activities. Now, the good thing is that you already got your style guide done, right, in your design process. So you kind of know what the colors are and the branding and maybe the types of images and icons that you're going to use, but you really got to nail down the rest of the visuals. And if you're going to be building videos, then that's going to be here in this development process as well. And then you put the visuals with the voiceover, right? Because you have to time your visuals to your voiceover. They got to sync up on that timeline. And so you want your voiceover done separately from your visuals. And then you just put it together on your timeline. Then once you've completed your course, you need to test everything. I mean, do not hand it off to somebody to give you feedback until you have gone through and thoroughly tested it yourself. Whether that's instructor-led training, e-learning, whatever it is, you need to run through it before you have somebody else run through it. And we know obviously that you're not going to catch everything. That's why you get peer feedback or your stakeholder feedback, but it's lazy. Yes, I said it. It's lazy to not read your own work, not to proofread your own e-learning development or whatever it is that you are working on before you have somebody else give you feedback. So that's why that's in there. Test and QA, check your own work. Also, it saves you like those moments like, oh, how did I miss that? Like, oh man. So test your own work. and then go and get feedback and implement that feedback based on what it is that you have developed. Now, I do want to point out, I didn't add this as like a process, like more steps. Feedback and implementation can take up to 3 rounds of feedback and implementation. For example, in e-learning, it's alpha, beta, gold for a lot of teams, companies, and if you're working on client projects, you probably definitely want to go through an alpha, beta, gold version of your solutions. All right, so that means feedback, implement, feedback, implement, feedback, implement. Now you're at gold. And then the final step, if it's e-learning, is that you'd want to load it to that LMS and test it. Make sure it works. That's your development process. Somebody says, Lori says, is there a way to assemble it easily with the software program? What's the question? Is there a way to assemble it easily with the software? You mean assemble in, so it just depends on where you're working, right? So I'm talking about development as overall development, right? So whether you're developing videos, whether you're developing e-learning, whether you are developing a PowerPoint deck, right? Whatever it is that you're developing, you're going to want to assemble it together, right? Whether it's in Camtasia, Storyline, Genially, all those other kinds of things, you will put the voiceover to the visuals, and that's what I mean by assemble. So Audacity in the visual. So, right, you export your Audacity recording as usually a WAV or MP3 file, right? You don't just use the Audacity project file. I just want to make that clear. You export it as an MP3 file, you put it on your timeline, and then you also put your visuals on the board if we're talking about Storyline, right? And then you sync up when those visuals come in according to what's said in the voiceover. Yeah, I hope does that help? Got it. Okay, good. That's the development process. Do we have other questions about the development process? Okay, in the design process, how different is script from storyboards? Why not storyboard? I gotta tell you, like I said, Huang, storyboards are really more for internal teams, right? You're gonna build a full storyboard if you are not the developer. If you are the developer and you're the designer, then the important thing about that's why you want to get a prototype, because you just want your stakeholders to approve kind of the overall look and feel for all the different main components, right? So you want to get them to approve the look of the course, the title slide, the content slide. That's why you show like one of each kind of thing, right? The practice activities and the assessments, right? So they can just see pieces of the full build. Storyboards, stakeholders, subject matter experts, they're usually not familiar with them. They boggle their minds, and they impede your progress in getting things done, right? Because they just don't even know how to read a storyboard. And so while it is important to learn that skill, it's important to learn that skill if you end up on a team where you are not the developer. And that's also why I say you can call your script your text storyboard, right? Because you can, once you have a style guide and get your prototype built, it's easy to follow that style guide, follow that prototype, and build the rest of the visuals based on your script, right? Because you can even write out little ideas about what you're going to see text-based in your script. That's why I call it a text storyboard. And that's quicker, that's more useful to you as a designer than to write out a whole stinking storyboard, especially if you're the developer. Laura says, how often do you record your own voiceover versus giving it to a voiceover artist? Well, for me, I was never given a budget for a voiceover artist until I became a freelancer. And so that meant that I did all my own voiceovers. And so, yes, you totally have to get over it unless you go work for a company where they have a voiceover budget. And you know, if they don't have a voiceover budget in your company, maybe there's somebody that can read your script for you. But even in that sense, even if you don't pay them, they're like an internal employee and they just got a great voice and they can read for you. you're still going to want to read through your script first before you hand it to them. What if you are given a PowerPoint of 100 slides and you are asked to take those and make an e-learning and storyline? What process should be followed? You are still going to go through the entire process, anonymous attendee. You're still going to find out, like, what's the purpose of this course, right? Because even if they've given you 100 slides, is it just going to be those 100 slides? No, you're still going to find out, like, what's the purpose of this course? Who are the learners? What's the performance goal? What can be taken out? How can you chunk down the content, right? Well, you're still going to go through the same process. You're going to treat that 100 slides of the PowerPoint as content given to you by a subject matter expert. So you're still going to go through the same process. Okay. Okay, PowerPoint to storyline. Would it be outline, design document, prototype, get feedback, implement feedback? Yeah, and don't forget about scripting. Outline, design document, script, prototype, and then develop the full thing. Yep, you got it. All right, let's see. What are the rules of thumb for ratio of visual, text, and script combined based on video types for heavily focused voiceover and which context should be? Okay, Huang, you're going to want to go and check out the 12 principles, the 12 multimedia principles for learning. And those are Mayer's 12 principles. You can find that in day 2 of the Become an IEL Challenge. You can Google Mayer's 12 principles, and there you're going to see the exact ratios of when to include text on the screen, especially if you have voiceover. You're usually going to want to go visuals, especially if you have voiceover, right? It's better to show than to tell. And if you're going to tell, show on the screen, right? Because it's a visual medium, right? The videos, e-learning, even right here, instructor-led training, right? It's still visual. Okay. All right, implementation process. This one's pretty easy. I mean, it's easier said than done anyway, right? You want an engagement campaign. And so that can look like several different things. It really kind of depends on how big the rollout is, is it a global rollout across the company and all those kinds of things. But you want some kind of engagement campaign, right? It's usually like emails that go out. The managers will start to tell their employees that training is coming, some kind of awareness that training is coming before it gets rolled out to everybody, right? You want to get that early excitement, that early buy-in for, oh yeah, we do need this. I'm so looking forward to learning this new skill. And there's a ton of different ways you can do it, right? You can email out like fun little teaser videos. You can announce it at the company meeting. You can have the managers tell their employees how important this training is. You can have them build up incentives for completing the training, or of course they can get punishments for not completing the training. Whatever it is, some kind of engagement campaign needs to happen before you implement and roll it out to the employees. The second step in the implementation process is to pilot, right? I recommend that you roll it out, even though you've gone through all those other steps in your process, right, to get to this implementation process. If it's, for instance, like a bigger rollout, like something over, something over 25 people, then you want to roll it out to a small number of those learners. And make sure that, the LMS, the course, all that kind of stuff is working before you do a full rollout. Because just imagine, right? Just think about it. Can you imagine what would happen if you didn't do like a small rollout and you just roll it out to all 5,000 employees across the globe without working out any kinks? Your inbox is going to fill up with that one error that everybody's going to find, right? And you want to avoid that. You don't want that. Okay. Making e-learning is like making a movie. People don't want to come back for part 2 of the crappy part 1 that they saw, right? And so you want it to be a clean, good experience the first time you roll it out. And so that's why I encourage you in your implementation process to do a pilot. All right, then you want to evaluate. All right, did it work? What did the learner say? Was anything broken? Did it all go smooth? Okay, once you know that it's solid, then you roll it out to all the learners, right? And this could also, your campaign could also be a part of, it could be like a trickle of different emails that go out too, right? The global rollout for the training is going to happen on this date and yada, yada. So that's pretty easy, right? Implementation process. Let me know if you have any questions on that. No, okay. Yeah, and Tiffany says we have an alpha and beta testing built in our process to avoid big issues like that. Yeah, right. Exactly. So, and you can include your pilots as part of your alpha and your beta, right? That can include like a little small rollout as well. Just depends. But I'm putting it in this process because I'm treating each process like its own thing. All right, and so of course, for the evaluation process, I'm just going to stick with Kirkpatrick model. It's easy to remember, it's pretty standard, and it's pretty effective, right? And so your process for evaluation is, what was the reaction, right? How do the participants respond? You can usually get that from a survey, right? The smile sheets, did they like it? Did they engage with it? You can also go and look at the back end of the learning management system if it's an e-learning course, and see if they, stayed in the course, how much time they spent in there. If they filled out any surveys about how the course was, it should populate into your LMS data. If it's instructor-led training, of course, you can hand out a survey at the end of that training and just get immediate responses from your participants about how did that instructor-led training go. Your next level of evaluation is learning, right? So what did they learn? And there are many ways of testing, the acquisition of knowledge, assessments, self-assessments, informal testing, and so on. And so you'll just want to make sure, of course, you've already built those assessments before you get to this stage, right? And so you're just going to go and look at those assessments and see, were they able to complete those assessments? Were they successful? What kind of percentage did they do if they took something that was graded? Right? When they did the scenarios, were they getting them right, or were they going back? Were they figuring it out? What about the simulations? Were they able to complete the simulations on their own for a software training, for example? And then the third level of evaluation is behavior, right? So are they actually applying what they learned on the job? And so this is really the ultimate test of effectiveness. And so this part is not easy to measure. And so that's why you do determine, right? What does success look like? What are those observable measurements of success that we're going to be looking for in the evaluation? And then you're going to go see if they translate during your evaluation process. So this is also why a lot of times you might want to include like a pre-test in your programs, so that you know where the learners were before they start and then where they are at the end. And that can also help you determine, did they grow during your program, during your course? And then your results. So did your training affect the business's bottom line, right? In the end, this, of course, is the most important question, right? Did you solve a business challenge? So did your training increase revenue? Did it decrease costs? Or did it improve profitability in some way? And if so, then it's a success. And so, of course, to answer this question, you'll need to extend measures of behavior change to business results. So, for instance, if your sales and marketing teams are communicating more effectively and those teams are pulling in more money, then it's a good bet that your training had a positive impact on that bottom line. Any questions about the evaluation process? And if you've done a really good job of designing and developing your training solution, then the evaluation should be just kind of checking the boxes, right? Because these things should already be built into the design of your program or your course, your training solution, whatever you're going to call it. Cindy says, what are some good ways to assess behavior change? Well, it depends on what you're measuring, right? So you always need to know what is the behavior that you're targeting, right? And how are you going to measure that behavior on the job, right? And so once you determine that, then it becomes easier to determine on the job if they've met that requirement. So for instance, if I was to train recruiters on, the recruiting process, well, my things of measurement would be their the time to fill ratio, right? How long did it take them to go and get a candidate, submit it to a hiring manager, and get them placed on a job, right? The time to fill ratio. And if that time to fill ratio goes up, well, that's probably a result of the training. And that's how you measure behavior change, because that is actually data that's from on the job. And it also answers the result question, right? It answers the behavior question and answers the result question. Does that help, Cindy? Okay, good. Kate says, would evaluating the behavior potentially be observing in the work environment again? Yeah, so absolutely, Kate, you can also go and observe on the floor. A lot of times, things, they call them KPIs, key performance indicators, right? And a lot of those things are built into the processes of the department, right, that you're training. So for instance, if it's like a customer service department, they have KPIs that they measure through data that comes through their systems and things like that. And so you could go and observe to see, how people answer the phones and those kinds of things. But a lot of that kind of stuff has been automated and systematized. But there are things that you could observe, in the workplace, for instance, but it's more about asking the managers about their observations, right? Because they know the keys about what they're looking for. So if you're like something like manufacturing or whatever, and they need to know how to like paint a boat, I don't know why I got that example, but they need to paint a boat and you gave them training, gave them hands-on stuff, right? Then going to on the job stuff, you can see if they are implementing the techniques that they were trained on in the job, or you can ask the managers. Okay, good. All right, so I also want to get into the development process for different mediums, right? Like e-learning, screencast videos, and so on and so forth, right? So screen capture video, right? So if you are going to show somebody a software tutorial, right? That would be considered a screen capture video. So of course you got to have your goals. What's the purpose of this video? That's easy. That could, be another process in itself if necessary, but you want to know a clear goal, purpose of the video. Script. Foundational. There are a lot of new instructional designers who are new to screen capture videos think, oh, you know what? I'm going to save myself time. I'm just going to record how to do it, and I'm going to say it at the same time. I don't need a script. I know how to do this. No. That is amateur hour. Okay. That's going to give you a lot of ums and filler words, and it's going to be slow for somebody to watch. Have you guys ever watched somebody do a screen capture video like that on YouTube? It's awful, right? It's painful. Professional screen capture, which is what you guys are going to build, because you guys are professionals. You're going to write a full script, step by step. Then you're going to read for clarity and make sure, read it out loud. Then you're going to record your video, your voiceover separate. Then you're going to capture, right? Separate all the visuals, and then you're going to put it together. You're going to put your voiceover together with the visuals and the call outs that you add on top of that screen capture. You want to record them separately. and then put them together in Camtasia or Screencast-O-Matic or whatever tool it is that you're using. And then, of course, when you're done with your screen capture video, you get your feedback. Yeah, on the fly, not good. It's not good at all. So you can significantly increase the production value of your output just by following this process. See, there's a lot of benefit to process. You guys have any questions about this? Okay. Some of these are not about that. Are you able to record and complete voiceover in one take? I will tell you my process for doing voiceover, Lori. So mine might be different from, Linda Cluck, who's in the Academy. She's like professional voiceover, but this is what I do. Okay. And this is my own little process of how I get it done. After I've read the full script out loud, I make any changes to words that are hard to say, or the rhythm's off, or maybe there's a better word to say things, or sometimes there's just words that when said together, they just kind of will trip you up with your mouth. And so I'll just change those things. So after I've done that, I've read through the script a couple times, right? Then I will stand up, and I, of course, have like a little space for my voiceover, and I will read the script, and I will record the whole thing in sections. So I record it in sections. So if it's e-learning, right, and I know ahead of time, right, because I've written out the full script and I've decided, which pieces are going to go on which slide already, right, with my text storyboard, then I will record those pieces as their own file, because it's a lot easier to upload a separate file for each slide than it is to record the entire script and then go chop it all up. That's going to take you more time. And if you outsource to a voiceover, I encourage you to pay the extra $10 or whatever it is that they charge to have them record separate files for each of your slides, if you know that you're going to do it on different slides, right? If you know it's going to be one animated video, right, like one Beyond video, for example, then that's one script, that's one take. What I do, whenever I'm doing a take or clip or whatever, if I'm doing a full script, whatever it is, whatever that file is, I will read it. And if I mess up, I will keep going. If I mess up, I'll go record voiceover for Barbara, and I make a noise like that so that it gives me a little indication in the actual waves of Audacity, so that I know that's a mess up, and then I start again, right? So if I messed up right there at separate, I would say it again. Record best, and then I'd say record voiceover separate from screen capture. So I give a little pause and I just keep it going. And anytime I make a mess up, I make that little noise, and then I start over at the beginning of the sentence. That makes it incredibly easy to go back and edit my own voiceover, right? Because then I just select it, cut it out, and then it just goes back to where it is, and it's all pretty clean. Oh, see, Claudia Chic claps. That also is another great technique. It's probably better than my dolphin screech. So, oh, and Rebecca Ford uses a clicker. So yeah, so there's a lot of options there. So definitely keep it going. And it also keeps you in your flow too, instead of getting frustrated, because you're going to make mess ups. No doubt about it, no matter how long you've been doing voiceover. And so just make a noise, start back over at the beginning of the sentence. All right. Instructor-led training. You're going to see all of these processes are very similar. Goals, what's the purpose of the training? Assessments, right? I encourage you to build your assessments first in any kind of course design. And so how are you going to measure success in your instructor-led training? What are the activities that you're going to include? And what is going to be the content that's going to help you drive the activities and the assessments? And then, of course, you're going to develop your materials, right? And so for instructor-led training, whether it's virtual or in person, You're usually going to need some kind of PowerPoint, a facilitator guide, a participant guide. And also, if it's in person and you're doing activities like a flip chart, a flip board, you're going to, need to get together all those materials if you're going to do it in person, and all those logistics, right? And so if it's in instructor-led training in person, then you're going to think about the facilities. You need to reserve a room. What kind of equipment do you need? How are you going to group the tables? If you're going to have group activities, you want to have groups, have them in like little circles. Is it going to be a round table kind of thing? Are they going to throw balls to answer questions? Whatever it is, you want to think about the logistics of your room. And of course, if it's virtual, then you want to think about your logistics as far as like getting your Zoom set up. Are you going to need to set up your polls ahead of time? Are you going to do breakout sessions? And you're going to want to test all those different things. And this is the process for instructor-led training. Jennifer says, what equipment do you recommend for recording voiceovers? There is a little, I recommend using free Audacity, and there's training for that in the Academy. Getting a microphone, you get something as simple as a blue snowball. I used to have a blue snowball for a very long time. Now I'm at the Blue Yeti. I think that's what it's called. I'm sure that the professional voiceover artists in the audience right now could give you some other microphones that are cheap and good. And you also want a room that's going to block out the noise. Now you can get in a room that'll block out the noise. I also found a lot of success with just one of those, like a box that goes around your microphone with some padding on it to kind of block out the extra noise. And you want to get rid of all your breaths. Oh, that you said equipment. So there's your equipment. You want like some kind of background noise canceling thing, a microphone, and something to record it on, like Audacity. There's much more that you could do. Rebecca says she uses her closet. And the closets are good, right? Because they have all that fabric and materials and all your clothes and all that kind of thing to take away some of the echoey sounds. A pop filter. Yes, I actually do have one of those too. Look. And those are good, especially because it keeps from making those pop sounds, which those do get annoying. You can't actually fix those in after production, and you got to get your mouth pretty close to that microphone. So pop filters are good to have. And you can make one with an old pantyhose if you don't want to buy one. You can buy one on Amazon, I think, for like $3. Yeah. Okay. All right, now the e-learning process, as you guys can imagine, it's a little bit longer than some of the other processes to make like an animated video, right? And so e-learning process, you gotta know your goals, your purpose of the course, outline, right? And this is if you are not just the developer, but you are the designer and the developer, right? If you're just the developer, then you might start at the development and you just read the storyboard and build it out, right? Then your process is not that difficult. But if you're doing from beginning to the end, it's goals, outline, right? You got to chunk that content down. What are the measurements for success? How are you going to test them? What are the practice activities, right? What are they going to do in the course? How will they practice? Script, word for word, and include in your script where the assessments are going to go, where the activities are going to go, what are you going to say for those assessments, what are you going to say for those practice activities, a style guide, what's your course going to look like, prototype, right? That small sample that we talked about in the other process. Develop your full course and test it. And of course, feedback, right? You guys got questions about e-learning? Boop, 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 boop. Oh, Laura asks on the instructor-led training script, how is this different from a facilitator guide? So you can include your script in the facilitator guide, but a facilitator guide is a formatted version of your script. So you want to write out your script separate from trying to design the facilitator guide at the same time you're trying to write your script. So that's why I encourage your process to be script, nope, just text on a document before you're ever trying to make things pretty. Okay, good. Someone says, I have not developed an instructor-led training yet. I guess the content comes from the SME. Yeah, the content can come from the subject matter expert. If it's for your portfolio, you can get content from several different places. Definitely go check out Select Your Topic and Do It Messy. And I also have open library resources and other resources that you can use to develop a course from, right? You can pretend as if that open course library or the content that I've handed you, I think I have a bunch of sales and recruiter training content that you can use to develop a course. You could pretend like that came from your SME if you're building portfolio assets. There's also portfolio prompts you can use and on and on. So there's a lot of places in the Academy to get content. Animated and explainer videos. What's the purpose of your video? All right, what's going to be that clear call to action? Are you going to be telling a story, or is it going to be an explainer video? What is the purpose of your video? Write a script, foundation for all videos, a voiceover. And I think I just kind of talked about this earlier. Read it out loud, record your voiceover. And then I encourage you to visualize and build as you go, especially in something like Beyond, because Beyond is so easy to make changes and updates. What's not easy to make changes to is after you've recorded the voiceover, right? And so that's why you always want to get feedback on that script. Always. In any of the process, you always want to get feedback on your script. But it's a lot easier to just visualize and build from your script in Beyond than it is to storyboard the entire thing. So if you guys have a script and you want time and beyond, throw your script to the Academy coaches and say you want time and beyond. That's good. You don't have to storyboard. We just say script or storyboard if somebody has storyboarded their Beyond video. And that's it. These are all the processes. And I know that I saw some questions in there.